If you've never seen a Beatles album, well, you've definitely seen this one. Four guys and a zebra crossing. Abbey Road. It's one of the most instantly recognisable album covers in history. But behind that simple photo of John, Paul, George and Ringo walking in a line across a London street, well, lies one of the craziest backstories in rock and roll. So trust me, there's way more to it than you think. Like and subscribe and I'll explain what I mean. By the summer of 1969, the Beatles were approaching the end of their amazing journey together. Although Let It Be would be released afterwards, Abbey Road was the final album on which all four members worked side by side in the studio. The sessions were weirdly rather calm, especially after the tensions that had plagued the White Album and Let It Be. In those two albums, both George and Ringo had quit the band. Despite lingering disagreements about which direction the band should go in, their musical chemistry was still undeniable. So you won't believe this, but the original plan was to take a picture of their next album cover in front of Mount Everest. Or on Mount Everest. I'm not sure. I don't really think any of them thought it through. I know it sounds crazy, but you see, the album was going to originally be named after the brand of cigarettes that engineer Jeff Emerick used to smoke. They were menthol cigarettes called Everest. But when they really started to think about it, the band couldn't be arsed, especially flying over to the Himalayas. And who could blame them? So instead of thousands of miles away on one of the deadliest and tallest mountains in the world, they decided to shoot it right outside.
Towards the end of the album, you start thinking, well, we need a title for this. So you're looking around, you're fishing around. And the engineer, Jeff Emerick, who is our Beatle engineer who did all the great sounds for us, was smoking cigarettes called Everest. They're like a kind of menthol cigarette at the time. And we kind of looked at that and said, Everest.
It's a good
It's
name.
kind of, it's big, it's heroic. That could be good for the album. And just one day we were in Abbey Road working, and I just sort of said, well, look, why not Abbey Road? Because if we did that, we could just run outside.
Right.
There's a level crossing, as we call it out there, zebra crossing. And we could just stand there, we could get photographed, come back to work. It'd take 2 seconds.
Right.
I said, and it's not a bad title, Abbey Road. To us, it was kind of just the name of a studio. But I thought if you take it out of context, it kind of sounds like Monastery Lane. Abbey Road.
Isn't it weird?
The name Abbey Road was chosen as a nod to EMI Studios, their studio home for nearly a decade, and where everything had began for them. They didn't know exactly what this album was going to be like, but they did know one thing. They knew that the album should be about the music, the bands, and the place that defined their sound. Simple, bringing it back to basics. The idea for the Abbey Road cover began as a sketch. Paul McCartney drew a rough stick figure diagram showing the band crossing a road. The idea was then passed to photographer Iain MacMillan, a Scottish friend of John and Yoko's. MacMillan was experienced but not yet famous, and his assignment was kinda basic. All he had to do was capture the Beatles walking across the zebra crossing outside EMI Studios. How hard could that be? The specific crossing is at the southernmost point of Abbey Road, at the junction with Grove End Road in the St John Woods area of northwest London. Working alongside Apple Records' creative director John Kosh, MacMillan developed a layout based on Paul's sketch. They discussed spacing, camera position, and even which direction the band should walk. They were told on a Wednesday that they needed an album cover by Friday. The photo session took place on Friday, August the 8th, 1969. Although some accounts have said that it was a Sunday, and that would still make sense as the traffic would be a lot lighter on a Sunday morning. However, most of the accounts have said it was a Friday, so I'm going with a Friday. The famous Abbey Road photo was taken at around 11:35 AM. The weather was warm and slightly overcast, so it was perfect for the even lighting that they were looking for. The traffic on Abbey Road was constant, so a local policeman was stationed to stop the cars while the band walked back and forth across the crossing. Again, this makes me think that it was taken on a Friday if they needed a policeman there to manage the traffic. MacMillan climbed a small stepladder in the middle of the road and set up his Hasselblad camera. From that elevated position, he could capture the band in full stride, but he only had a few minutes to get that shot before the traffic resumed. The Beatles crossed the road just 3 times in total. Each time, MacMillan fired off 2 frames. so producing 6 photographs. The entire session only lasted about 10 minutes. Then the group returned to the studio for a normal day's recording, unaware that they just created one of the most iconic photos in rock and roll history. That afternoon, the Beatles and producer George Martin were back inside Abbey Road Studios. They were there to record a track that they called Ending, which would later become The End. The session was set for 2:30 p.m, so to fill the gap after the morning shoot, Paul took John back to his home on Cavendish Avenue. George and Mal Evans went to London Zoo and Ringo went shopping. Later on, Paul looked at all the photographs with a magnifying glass and selected the 5th picture. It was perfect. All 4 Beatles were visible, in clear stride, and moving together in rhythm. Lennon led the line, followed by Ringo, Paul, and then George. At first glance, the Abbey Road cover looks effortless. John's dressed all in white and leading confidently. Ringo follows in a smart black suit. Paul is barefoot and out of step with the others. And George, who's in denim and sandals, is just closing the line casually. The sequence unintentionally forms a visual rhythm. Light, dark, light, dark. But it was Tommy Nutter, who was an eccentric Savile Row tailor who brought a touch of style to the Beatles' Abbey Road album cover. Nutter actually dressed 3 of them, John, Paul and Ringo, in his signature sharp suits. The suits are timeless and cool, blending late 60s rock rebellion with a little bit of elegance too. Only George Harrison broke the pattern, appearing in denim, which I think made the contrast even stronger between them all. In the picture, George is the black sheep, the dark horse. Tommy Nutter actually went on to style more rock and roll icons like Mick Jagger, Elton John and David Bowie. But I think the real beauty is in the fact that none of the Beatles thought about what to wear when they arrived that day. They just came dressed as they would normally, and that's what's so cool about it. And they couldn't help but look cool. The photo is uncluttered, it's natural and it's quintessentially British. It's a very English looking street. You'd never see a street looking like that anywhere else. And even the small details have become legendary. So parked to the left of the crossing sits a white Volkswagen Beetle with the license plate LNW 281F. It belonged to a local resident, but after the album's release, the plate became so famous that it was repeatedly stolen. And the car itself was later displayed in a museum. The mystery man on the Abbey Road album cover is Paul Cole, an American tourist who happened to be standing on the pavement while his wife was in a museum nearby. Apparently, Cole didn't even know who the Beatles were at the time. What? Months later, he recognised himself when the album was released. His random appearance on one of the most iconic album covers in the history of rock and roll has become a weird piece of Beatles lore. But there's one thing that I haven't mentioned that I haven't forgotten about. Probably my favourite thing about the record. John Kosh made a bold decision that gave the album its power. He insisted that the front cover should contain no text, no band name, no album title, nothing to distract from the image. The Beatles in 1969 were the most famous band in the world. Everyone knew who they were. That decision helped make the photo become so timeless. Now, when you look at the other Beatles' artwork, their name and the album name aren't exactly peppered everywhere. Sometimes they just use a little title tucked away somewhere, but I think it's the factor not included at all. Why did they need to? Of course these are the Beatles, and of course they're on Abbey Road. On the back cover, a photo of the street sign reading Abbey Road was taken a short distance away, near the corner of Alexandra Road. MacMillan and Kosh drove round all day trying to find the best street sign. MacMillan was furious that people kept walking across while he tried to get the perfect shot. But little did he know that when the woman in the blue dress walked past, he'd be capturing something effortlessly cool. And over time, that wall has become a pilgrimage site, covered in Beatles fan graffiti from all around the world. Of all the details in the photograph, Paul McCartney's bare feet have definitely inspired the most discussion and the strangest theories. Some fans at the time claimed that the image was secretly meant to symbolise a funeral procession. So according to this interpretation, each Beatle represents a figure from a funeral. John in white symbolises a clergyman. Ringo in black is the undertaker, Paul, who is barefoot and out of step, is the corpse, and George in denim is the gravedigger. And that's not all. The Volkswagen LMW 281F plate was said to mean 28 if, suggesting that McCartney would have been 28 years old if he were alive. Fans also pointed to the fact that Paul held a cigarette in his right hand even though he was left-handed, as another supposed evidence of a body double. Of course, McCartney's alive and well, and the theories are just pure coincidence. Well, at least I think so. But if you want to know more about this, well, I have done a video on it already, so go check that one out. When Abbey Road was released on September the 26th, 1969, it was instantly hailed as one of the band's finest works. It spent 17 weeks at #1 in the UK. Songs like Come Together, Something, and Here Comes the Sun have cemented its reputation as a masterpiece. And I think when it comes down to it, when push comes to shove, I think I have to say it's probably the most perfect Beatles album. But the cover photo quickly took on a life of its own, becoming just as iconic as the music that it displayed. If you ask most people who aren't fans of the Beatles, they've seen that photo before. Within weeks, tourists and fans began visiting Abbey Road to imitate the walk. Over the years, it has become one of London's most photographed spots, with thousands of fans making the same crossing every day. The road itself is now a protected landmark, and a live webcam monitors the crossing 24/7. In less than 15 minutes, with only 6 photos taken, the Beatles created an image that would endure forever. It's crazy that there were no retakes, no elaborate setups or lighting rigs. They just used natural daylight and perfect timing to create such a great photo. Each of the 6 shots does have its subtle variations. The band are walking in opposite direction in some, or some are slightly out of alignment. In some of them, McCartney actually wears sandals. But in the image that we all know, of course, he's barefoot. Why did he choose to go barefoot? I've done a lot of digging, and without getting too conspiratorial, the simple reason I found is that it was because his sandals were too tight.
The idea was to walk across the crossing, and I showed up that day with sandals, flip-flops, and so it was so hot, and I kicked them off and walked across barefooted. So this started some rumor that because he was barefooted, he's dead. I couldn't see the connection myself. No, I don't. You know, I just laughed it off, but it was a little bit strange because people did start looking at me like, right. Is it him or a very good double?
Well, that was the idea. That was the other part of it, that there was a guy who looked like you taking your place.
No, well, this is him.
Yeah. Or is it?
In the other 5 shots, they don't quite capture the synchronicity of the way they all walk together. It's in the 5th photo that it almost feels too perfect. That's perhaps the heart of the Abbey Road story. It's a single, unplanned moment that's crystallised forever. In 2010, the crossing itself was granted as an official landmark status by the British government, recognising its cultural and historical importance. Even the studio's street sign, which was once stolen so often that it had to be mounted high on a wall, is now encased behind protective glass. What began as an ordinary London street scene is now sacred ground in music history. Over the years, countless myths have grown around the Abbey Road shoot. As always, especially with the Beatles, some fans have claimed that the band rehearsed for hours, but in reality, the shoot was spontaneous and very quick. Lennon later remarked that the photo's power lay in how ordinary it is, that it's just us walking across the street. That understatement may be the truest reflection of the Beatles' genius. They could turn something ordinary into something unforgettable. To me, the Abbey Road cover feels like a goodbye. The Beatles are seen mid-stride, walking away from the studio that defined their career. And within months, the band would be finished, and the era of Beatlemania would officially close. The photo unintentionally captures that moment of transition, from Beatles to men, from a band to 4 solo artists. But although Abbey Road marked the final time that the Beatles recorded together in the studio, the famous crossing photo wasn't their last group image. Just 2 weeks later, on Friday the 22nd of August 1969, the 4 reunited at John Lennon's home, Tittenhurst Park, for one final photo shoot. Yoko and Linda were also there. More than half a century later, the Abbey Road cover remains one of the most powerful images in pop culture. It's endured because it feels timeless. It's been parodied by Paul himself, Kanye West, Booker T. And when you look at the photo, every element, from the lighting to the composition to the way they're all moving, it feels alive and like it could have been taken yesterday. It doesn't feel like it's got a date on it. For me, it's got to be the Beatles' most iconic picture. But what do you think? And it's one of my favourite album covers of all time. Why? I love it so much because I think we've finally got an image that represents the full arc of the Beatles. So if you compare Please Please Me, where you have four lads that are essentially indistinguishable from one another, you now have four separate, unique characters, each who have matured and evolved on this amazing 7-year journey. And when you look at the photo and you know that they're walking away from Abbey Road, it feels like the perfect farewell from the most remarkable band of all time. Oh, thank you very much for watching, all you rock and rollers. Wait a minute, where are you going? Please let me know your favourite Beatles album cover down in the comments below. Hell, let's add to that. What's your favourite rock and roll album cover of all time? I'm going to get off now, but I'll be back next week, so I'll see you all down the road.